Buffalo Boy. One of many today. It's a beautiful afternoon here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the backyard. The local time is 1:44 on a Friday afternoon, and we will begin our program called Green Rocks with Chris Mattinson at the top of the hour at 2 o'clock local time. But between now and the top of the hour, we're going to test things out, make sure we're functional, and we're going to do a few thank yous and things of that nature. Here we are today talking about green rocks, session O of the alphabet. And you are welcome. You are invited to come back for session P, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. Pacific time. That's our usual time. To go to the eastern Cascade foothills, not the western. So the last time we were on the western foothills of the Cascades, we're going to go up and over the crest and look for some siblings, rock-wise, in the eastern foothills of the Cascades. Okay, well that's enough speaking to just see how we're doing here. And the sun is brilliant at the moment, and it looks like it will be brilliant for the rest of the afternoon. How are we doing here? Where's my little mug? Here. How are we? Are we doing 5 by 5? That's wonderful. Mug by Pat Yeager, I recall. Is that correct, Pat? From Tacoma, thank you. Our guest has the other mug as well. Ashley, hello, Tennessee. I love green rocks, says Myra. Garrett, the Dutch night owl, is with us. The Jurassic Coast in the United Kingdom, Minnesota. So far so good, says somebody, so they know the experience I've had in the backyard here. Loud and clear, says Scott from Phoenix, Arizona. Michael's in Ireland, hello, good evening. Elsie in the UK. Aarhus, Denmark. Ben is saying hi to Kathy. Oh, there's Kathy. She's from Brisbane, Australia, live. Must be early for you, Kathy. Geologically speaking, in the hizzy. That's Todd Smith, ladies and gentlemen, from Southern California. Hello, Patrick. Northampton, UK. Frederick. Jennifer skipping work in Boise. Hello from Germany. Las Vegas. Blodgett, Oregon. We have many familiar names here. Ben is in the Netherlands. South Wales. Edmonton, Alberta. Tokyo. Hello, Denise. So I trust we're doing okay, huh? We're doing just fine? Chris, would you mind turning your mic on? And we've got a 2-mic setup, baby. This is advanced.
Okay, can you hear me?
So Chris has got his mic turned on. Can I ask about Chris? So Chris, can you tell us a little, muffler boy, there's going to be a lot of that. I'll try to ignore it, I promise. I know it's obnoxious. Chris, where did you grow up and where did you go to school?
So I grew up in California, in Central California, if you believe that concept, or Southern California, if you're more of a dividing the state in two pieces. And
Okay.
did my undergrad degree at UC Santa Barbara.
UC Santa Barbara.
Went to Stanford for my grad work, and in 2008 came up here and joined the faculty.
Nice. 2008? It's been that long?
It has. Scary.
Damn. Wow, more than 10 years. Okay, how did that go with Chris? 5 by 5 for Chris, says Daniel. A couple more reports on Chris. They can hear you fine. Oh, that's really nice to hear. So we're going to be switching spots here. You know, we're going to keep our distance, of course. We've got a slight breeze. Oh, good. So it's working. I think just keep it on if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, and Nick, for your info,
Yeah.
Muffler Boy isn't nearly as loud on the receiving end as he is here in the yard. So
I know. Chris has been a loyal watcher, and just like you guys, and you guys are all saying, you know, you can't hear Muffler Boy, but I don't know. It makes me feel better I need to stop. That's the point. I'm the only guy that can hear it, so I just need to stop.
Come on, Nick, it's part of the shtick. What is this, live stream number 90 or something? You can't stop now.
It is something like that. Okay, it's time for some thank yous. So a little housekeeping from the last show. I shared, there was the name of a cat in Portland that sent gifts to Bijou, who's inside the house napping, by the way. And you remember this, there were these cute little cat toys with very potent, this is Washington, this is Oregon, this is a key lime pie, and everybody was asking, I watched the replay, everybody says, well, if it's so potent, like where can I get it? So, this very effective, I can endorse the effectiveness if you're looking to drug up your cat. Catnip, this episode of Nick from Home brought to you by Catnip Toys. Catniptakeout.com. And a little punch card if you really want. All right, so I wanted to follow through on that. And I felt bad because do you remember last Friday I had the Halloween gifts, and it was Jay and Eric from Sacramento that sent this enormous box with these 3 big things, and I was assembling the Halloween gift, and it ended up being, do you remember this? Frankenstein, Frankfurters with bloody ketchup inside of a stein of beer. And I didn't even think to take the paper thing off of the stein. Well, I'm sure you guys were disappointed when I didn't actually reveal what was on the mug, which you made custom for this show. So here it is, Steve and Jay. Sorry, here it is, Eric and Jay. A toast to Mew, to meow. So I feel better doubling back on that. So thanks, fellas. There's a personalized mug for you here. Yes, there you go. They could hear that clink, Chris. Now I had to make sure to grab a gift from my office, one of the all-time gifts from last spring, because it fits in perfectly with this show. So do you remember this gift? This is all handcrafted. And this rock was collected personally by Steve. It's the same Steve as Cozy Fort by Steve. But it's a green rock, damn it. And I emailed Steve this week and I said, hey, remind me where you got your green rock. He said, Burlington Hill. And that was the Easton Metamorphic Suite we were talking about last time, and we will talk about the Easton Metamorphic Suite again today. So thanks again for this gift from Steve. It's proudly on display in my office, but I brought it home for this special occasion, Steve. It's going back to the office tonight. And speaking of custom stuff, this just arrived an hour ago from Dogny in Spokane. I couldn't resist sending you a personalized coffee mug. Be sure to read the fine print. I looked for exotic terrain coffee, but I couldn't find any. Go figure. Maybe, just maybe, there's some exotic terrain around Mount Spokane in the Spokane area. My brother Clint got me watching on your YouTube shows, and we both enjoy it. I'm now obsessed. Here's to you. Okay, so thank you, Dogny. So Dogny sent some coffee from, there is a peak called Mount Spokane north of Spokane. It's not really an exotic terrain story, but if we ever do a Chalice series of live streams, that's part of that show. But how about the personalized mug after I wipe my nose here? Excuse me. This is only going to make sense for those who have been with us quite a while. Mellow Grello. Do you remember what Grello, the color Grello, stands for on our exotic terrain map? A combination of gray and yellow, Grello. I think it's a color I made up. Maybe not. A product of Cache Creek. Mellow Grello. Oh, nice job, Dagny. Thank you. And speaking of colors, as soon as I said in the last show, as soon as the words left my mouth, my coloring pencils are down to their nubs, I knew I shouldn't have said it. I still have plenty of lead left in those colored pencils, but Patrick and his mother to the rescue. Patrick, I've been having a blast with my 72 new colored pencils, half of which I've already earmarked for specific terrains that we will be discussing in the next month, Patrick, but all these crazy different shades of green and yellow and brown and blue, I'm using all of them. I'm using a lot of them. And Patrick and his mother, Teresa, wind's picking up. They sent me some white paper that's like legal pad length so that I don't run out. Well, what does Patrick's note say? Hi, Professor Nick. I picked these out super special for you. I hope you enjoyed the colored pencils on the paper. Maybe it will help you have enough room for the Alexander terrain and others. Love, Patrick. Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, Teresa. And one more and we can finally get to our guest and we can get to the top of the program. I still got 4 minutes according to my watch. Julie from Prosser. Drove up from Prosser last Sunday. I missed her. We were done live streaming and I was out on a hike immediately to clear my head. But when I got home, this was waiting for us. Dear Nick, a travesty. I cannot bear to see you drinking Cupcake Cellar's wine of all things. Please, man. Friends don't let friends drink exotic terrain wines. Here is some Washington wine from the German chocolate cake. This is the good stuff. Please share with Liz, but don't let her drink all of it. Julie from Horse Heaven Hills, St. Michel Wine Estates, Washington's best AVA. So, isn't that nice? Julie must have delivered a bottle of wine. Well, she delivered a case of wine. And we haven't been the same since. So we have been enjoying the wine tremendously, Liz and I, at the end of a day on talking about the day's events. So thank you, Julie. And Chris, our guest, and I will enjoy a little bit of the wine at the end of today's show. So thank you for your generosity, Julie from Prosser. Okay, that's plenty. Checking one more time to see if we're in good shape. I don't have to collect my head too much because I'm only talking for the first 10 minutes and then I'm going to be kind of having Chris do much of the heavy lifting today, but I'll be, of course, part of the proceedings. A little show and tell, everything else. Oh, everything's looking good. That's great. You want to try one more time? So you went to Stanford, in what years were you at Stanford?
Well, I started in 2000, and then I worked there in the ion probe lab and did some teaching for about 3 years before coming up here. So
Okay.
2000 to 2008.
Yeah, more than half a decade for sure. So Chris is a soft-spoken guy, but that was working okay for you? I don't think it'll be any different. When he's standing here, it's not going to make a difference. Good, okay. I finally figured out the microphones. I finally figured out how to have both of them work.
You know, I've heard you say, well, I'm only going to talk a few minutes here, so that's why I sent you that Ambrose Pierce. You know, I will go straight at my story without introductory remark, as is my custom.
Getting the business from the guest. I love it. Nice. All right. Give me 1 minute and we will start. And I promise my introduction will be short. That sun is especially strong, so I don't know. We'll work with it. It looks good on screen, but you got to squint, I think, a little bit. More than a little bit. All right. Thanks again for doing this.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Oh, you bet. Steve, I'm going to put your gift off to the side. I don't want to trip over it or have anything happen to it. So I'm showing it off one more time, Steve. Serpentinite from Burlington Hill between Everett, Washington and Bellingham, Washington. Well, a pleasant good afternoon to you all. Thank you for tuning in for this episode of our Exotic Terrain live stream sessions, that's wordy, A to Z. Today is a unique episode, and we're taking a break from our march through all of these exotic terrains. We were up in British Columbia for a while, and we're finally now down in Washington, but there are so many of these green rocks that are in some of these exotic terrains that we needed an expert, in my opinion, because I don't have the expertise to really understand how to read some of these green rocks. So we'll do some live Q&A. We might do more than the normal amount of live Q&A because you have a rare opportunity to talk to somebody who knows more than most about igneous and metamorphic petrology. And he also has a lot of experience here. Chris Mattinson, who I work with, he's the department chair here at the department, and so he's a very busy guy, and yet he's carved out an hour to be with us this afternoon. We have two objectives, and really two objectives only this afternoon. Anything beyond that is just kind of extra bonus coverage. So goal number one is to get some help from Chris as to what's going on with all these rocks. These are all names, and the names have vague connotations for me, and to be honest, I've been doing enough kind of programming to the general public where I just say, yeah, this is a green rock and it's from the oceans. Well, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. So how many of these words pertain to rocks versus something else, number one? Of the green rock names, which are from the middle of the ocean, which are from the edge of the ocean? In other words, what's a specific story that some of these green rocks can tell us? That's objective one. The other objective is how do we identify a couple of these things? Like I had Chris over last night just before it got dark, and he said, I want to see some of the green rocks you have in your backyard so I know what I'm working with. And he brought a few of his own to supplement my little collection. But, you know, I don't know what I'm looking at. I know it's a green rock. I don't know, is this ophiolite? Is this serpentinite? Is this jade? Is this Donite? I don't know the difference. I don't know how to tell them apart. So you hear my two messages? How can we tell these rocks apart, just identification-wise, and then also, what stories can they tell from our geologic past as it pertains to our exotic terrain story? The last 2 minutes of my introduction, I promised, buddy, I promised, is that I want to remind you where we started getting into green rocks. Larry Ladder's a little wobbly suddenly. I don't understand why. So I'm not going to get the clipboard for this. But we looked this is last time now. This is on Sunday morning. And this is from Ned Brown's work. And we're up surrounding Mount Baker. So Mount Baker is in the red triangle, and here's the town of Bellingham, where two of our boys went to school. And so this is an amazing area between Bellingham and surrounding Mount Baker. And I don't need to go through it all, but I just want to show you that that green stuff is the Easton Metamorphic Suite. And there's a variety of kind of truly green rocks. That's why I picked green for the color in this Eastern Metamorphic Suite. And if you come back on Sunday morning, we're going to see more of this Eastern Metamorphic Suite, not by Bellingham, but close to Ellensburg, believe it or not. Just right over there. I'm pointing to the west. So that's the application of much of this green material. We're going to be continuing to use exotic terrain material that's green. Hey, that's it. I'm done with my intro. I hope that you feel comfortable with what our objectives are. Are you still there? I don't see any comments streaming at the moment. Let me just pause and make sure you're still connected with us. Oh God, they're already asking questions about jadeite and nephrite and everything else. So Chris, would you mind?
Okay.
I'll keep my distance from you. And please feel free to start however you want, just kind of introducing yourself or getting into the content right off the bat.
Sure. Well, thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me over. So, yeah, I guess we'll just launch in. So, thinking about Nick's theme, I thought I might start off by paraphrasing / plagiarizing a well-known quote and thinking about how we can think about these different rocks. And some rocks are born green, some rocks achieve greenness, and some rocks have greenness thrust upon them. So I thought that might be kind of a fun way to frame
I'm going to move this slightly.
what we're going to be talking about here.
Get that shadow out of your face. Good, good. I like that.
Sure. So, Nick, did you just want to start with just kind of going through some of that terminology, or?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me get you rolling this way, so I can keep my distance here.
Okay.
So on the chalkboard, Chris, I've got these two different settings. That's where I'd like to start, if you don't mind. So
Okay.
How many of these rocks pertain to a subduction zone versus something that's not a subduction zone?
Okay. So yeah, great layout here. So pretty much green rocks. Most of those on there are either associated with mafic rocks, so basalt composition rocks, or ultramafic rocks, so mantle composition rocks.
Okay.
And you get both of them in these two settings, but you get different types of them. So we can think about it in terms of composition, mafic versus ultramafic,
Okay.
and we can also think about it in terms of pressure and temperature. So as a petrologist, that's how I think about it. So in your show, you've been doing a lot with things moving laterally, either coming in and accreting, strike slipping along the margin, but we can also think third dimension. Where are we in depth where these things are forming?
Okay.
And so if you think about mid-ocean ridge, you have the ocean plates pulling apart, you have hot mantle welling up to the surface, you have high temperature at relatively low pressure conditions. You've got a lot of hydrothermal circulation. That's where a lot of those green rocks are coming from in that setting.
Okay.
Whereas in the subduction zone, you have the plate diving back into the mantle, high pressure, low temperature conditions. So different physical conditions leading to different rocks.
Okay.
So that would be kind of the overview picture.
I like it. Is there a hand sample anywhere within reach? I can grab your mug from you, give you some hands.
Sure.
Do you want to just try to show and tell a little bit?
Sure.
Like, is there any of those that are for sure a subduction zone rock versus an ophiolite or a spreading ridge rock?
Absolutely. Let's see. You had a sample of the green schist, blue schist from French Cabin.
Well, let's take a big
let's
one
see.
here.
Big one?
Is that a decent one? Or do you want to do even bigger?
That's a good one, yeah.
Okay. I'll switch you.
Okay. So, yeah, well, let's see. Nick is the expert on this, but just sort of holding this sample up. Hopefully you can see there's a bit of a bluish tinge to it, a little bit of greenish. So this is...
Yeah, let me switch you.
yeah.
All right, we'll keep our distance. I'm going to flip you
All
around
right.
and see if this works okay. We're looking at a blue schist metamorphic rock at the moment. It's a big sucker. Nope. All right, I'm coming back. The light's wrong for that. So you go ahead and keep talking if you like, Chris.
Sure.
What can we point out here?
So this particular sample, really fine grained, so you're going to be a little hard pressed to see a whole lot on the camera. You can kind of see a sheen to it, but the blue and the green there, those are some minerals. We can get into that a little more later, but that type of rock is really the smoking gun of a subduction zone setting.
Subduction zone. So we're for sure, where are we in the subduction zone with the blue schist?
Blue schist, you're pretty low temperature. Higher pressure, but not the highest pressure.
Okay.
So, you know, in terms of depth, you're probably down 30, 40 kilometer burial depth, but very low temperature. We're down at, you know, maybe 300 degrees centigrade type temperatures.
Okay.
And just for comparison, if
Yeah.
you just think about where you are in some random place at 40 kilometers depth,
Okay.
oh, sorry.
You're good.
You're probably, you know, you're probably looking at, you know, let's say if you're in the mid-continent, you're probably looking at, you know, 500, 600 degrees C. If you're in a, you know, where we are in a more tectonically active area, a bit more than that.
Okay.
And if you're at a mid-ocean ridge, of course, you got really hot stuff. You know, you got magma just a kilometer below the surface right at the ridge.
Okay. Well, we have a fair amount of blue schist, and we're going to look at some beautiful blue schist on Sunday. And you're saying first takeaway is we can't make blue schist any other place. It's got to be a subduction zone.
Right, because pretty much where do you get those low temperatures at such great depths?
Give us the temperature range again and the pressure range again off the top of your head for a blue schist.
Oh gosh, blue schist, you know, that particular one, that's probably around 7 kilobars. So one bar is ballpark atmospheric pressure, so about 7,000 times atmospheric pressure.
Wow.
And a handy rule of thumb is 1 kilobar of pressure. That represents a burial depth of between 3 and 3.5 kilometers in the earth, if you just think of the weight of the overlying rock column.
Okay.
So we're down probably 7 or so kilobars for that stuff.
Let me show another one that's even bigger, but I'm feeling like I need to show off. Oh, baby. Oh. Blue schist from a place called French Cabin Mountain. We'll talk about it. Now, I need to give myself a break. Is there a zone or a particular finger point on that subduction zone where the blue schist, where those temperature and pressure conditions are?
Sure, you'd be right in kind of this zone. I mean, depending on if you're drawing the crust versus the whole lithosphere here. You know, if this is the surface and you know, you got to get down to it to enough depth to form those high pressure minerals. But if you go too far, you're going to transition that into an eclegite at higher pressure and higher temperature.
Hold off. Well, okay, let's do it. That was I don't think we have an eclegite, do we? Ooh, he brought an eclegite.
Of course.
All right.
This is
Go for it.
okay. This is not a let's see, which end is the camera on? Is
Oh,
it
it's
over?
just kind of, camera lens is probably
Just
right there.
up, okay, let's see.
Oh, I'll
here.
give you, it is tricky.
Yeah,
It
maybe
is tricky.
you're better at this one.
All right, so this is an Eclegite.
So this is not a local rock. This one's from Norway, actually, but it's a beautiful Eclegite. So the green mineral is a green sodium-containing pyroxene, and then there's beautiful red garnets in there. So that's what that rock Nick was just showing there will turn into.
Oh,
when
that was
you,
my cue.
subduct it enough.
So you take this, which is a metamorphic rock, a metamorphic blue schist, because it has kind of a blue sheen to it. What are the minerals in a blue schist?
So the blue mineral is a blue amphibole.
Okay.
It's called glaucophane.
Okay.
And it's a sodium-rich blue amphibole, really the most distinctive thing. And then that's got the green in there. Epidote is one of the main minerals there, so that's a pretty common mineral. You see a lot. It's got that really distinctive pistachio green or avocado green color to it, and forms in a wide variety of environments.
Okay. So you had us kind of semi-shallow for the blue schist, and you said if we go deeper in the subduction zone,
Yes.
we're getting this. Now, what minerals are here then?
So the green mineral is that green sodium-rich pyroxene.
You
It's
just
called
said that.
amphicite.
Sorry.
And the red is garnet. So what's interesting about that is the density. It's about 3.5 grams per cubic centimeter, which is actually higher density than the mantle that's down at those depths. So that's part of what gives that pull force to a subduction zone. Part of what's driving the plates
Yeah.
is those metamorphic reactions increasing the density as part of that subduction process.
Okay.
Other thing to note, garnet and pyroxene, neither of those minerals have water in them.
Okay.
The blue schist, you've got the glaucophane, it's an amphibole. Amphiboles contain water, and the epidote also contains water.
Okay.
So you're going to higher density but less water trapped in the mineral structure. And it's that release of water, which of course is feeding the volcanoes like Mount St. Helens, also is playing a role in some of the earthquake activity in the plate as well.
Okay. All right. Let's take a break for a second. I told you this guy was encyclopedic. I mean, it's amazing. You're hearing him okay, number one. I have an improv I think I want to do with Larry the Ladder here, and we'll see if we can get some close-ups with better light. But let me pause. Are we doing okay with just the audio and the visual just in general? I know Chris isn't perfectly framed up, etc. But I'm just kind of, okay, the audio's good on you, Chris.
Okay.
I'm going to try this. You know, that's the beauty of this live streaming. You're not plugged in, so you can just kind of, what if I do this? Come on, Larry, get settled. Thank you. Talking to the ladder now. Okay, okay. All right. I'm talking to you now, viewers. Isn't this better? Can't we see better now with the zoomed up camera? Crappy grammar there, but they love the audio. I'm still waiting. Okay, they like it. So Chris, let's see. Do you want to feed me, while we got this good setup, do you want to feed me a few others and just you can kind of just talk to us about what we've got?
Sure. So here's one. Maybe we should have even started with this one. This
Sure.
is the basalt before it's been cooked up too much. So this is what my colleagues, my old advisor would refer to as a popcorn pillow. So that's actually a little piece of a little tiny baby pillow basalt there. You can see that rounded shape to it. So that's basalt, but it's just started to turn a little green. It's just been cooked up very little bit. So this is kind of what you get when the thing's just barely heading down the trench.
So it's still a basalt, but it's kind of like a slightly metamorphosed basalt?
Very slightly metamorphosed, yeah.
Okay, all right. And by the way, is that, now I'm getting greedy. Now I want to get you on camera too. All right, so we'll try this. And, oh shit, sorry Patrick. All right. So far we've talked about green schist. Is green schist originally Sorry, we've talked about blue schist. Is the blue schist originally basalt? Like, can we take all this stuff back to the basalt originally?
The composition of that little popcorn pillow and the composition of that blue schist that you were holding and the composition of that eclegite are all just about the same. They're all a basaltic composition.
Huh. Okay.
So the reason they're different is because of different pressures and temperatures leading to different minerals.
Got it. Thank you. All right. So we start with a basalt that is slightly pillowed like this. If we keep going way down the trench and we're past the blue schist zone, we're now to this eclegite thing, and the garnets are popping up because of the high pressures.
The high pressure. So the garnet is a high density mineral. The pyroxene, also high density mineral.
Eclegite. Okay. What else? Anything else? Is green schist part of this?
Green schist is part of this. It depends on your temperature. So if you're a little higher temperature, you're going to go through the green schist facies, and kind of depending on exactly the relationship between pressure and temperature, controls which facies you go through if you're imagining a subduction pass. So if you have a subduction zone like ours here, the Cascadia subduction zone right off the coast, it's pretty young oceanic crust. The spreading ridge that's generating that is not too far offshore, and that subduction rate is pretty slow. So in other words, there's plenty of time for the heat to conduct in. So really the name of the game is the contrast between heat conduction, which is slow, and the pressure increase, which of course is instantaneous. As you're increasing in pressure, pressure goes up right away.
Got it.
But it takes a while for the heat to conduct in. So we have a relatively warm subduction zone here. So based on the thermal modeling, we're expecting that is going to pass through the green schist facies and have not much blue schist facies at all here. Whereas if you go the other end of the extreme in northeast Japan, you have our very old Pacific plate. Old and therefore cold, and therefore more dense and sinking more rapidly into the mantle. The heat isn't conducting any faster, but it's going down a lot faster. So you follow a much colder trajectory in that case.
And yet we have a ton of green schist, like the Shuxon green schist and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting, I won't make you lift up that big block anymore.
I'll do it. Why not? That was a challenge.
Okay.
Okay. Go ahead.
All right, so there, if you, I don't know about seeing it on that piece, but at that locality, you can see it's actually interlayered, blue schist and green schist.
Oh, yeah.
And so
are these
the big
other
picture is pressure and temperature is what's controlling that, and we're saying, well, this is all pretty much a basalt, but the layering comes in because, well, pretty much isn't exactly the same. So there's small differences in composition controlling whether you're getting that blue amphibole or you're getting those green minerals. So the green schist, you've got the epidote, which is green, chlorite, another green mineral. That's that platy mineral, but since it's usually pretty fine grain, you don't see the individual grains so well.
I got you.
Actinolite, a green amphibole, and then there's some albite in there, a feldspar. Whereas in the blue schist, you've got the blue amphibole, that glaucophane, and then you can have that epidote commonly present. There are other minerals that can be present as well. But once you get that blue amphibole, you start really noticing the blue color to the rock, which is really nice in those particular samples.
Okay, so we're scoring at home and we're subduction all the way so far.
Yes.
Anything else that's an obvious subduction zone related rock that you can see here? Or do you...
You know, I do have some others. Maybe we'll wait on those till later.
Okay.
Well, what the heck? We can show one.
Attaboy.
So this is actually totally different geological environment from what I was just talking about, but it's rare that you actually see beautiful epidote. And here's a piece where you can actually see some beautiful individual crystals. So this is actually from the Denny Creek skarn, just on the other side of Snoqualmie Pass, so pretty local. So this is where the magma from a pluton, as part of the Cascades arc, invaded some carbonate rocks, some marbles and limestones and so forth, and as part of that reaction formed this beautiful, really coarse-grained epidote. Usually it's just fine-grained pistachio green, and that's all you see. But
So this is a mineral, not a metamorphic rock.
yeah, I mean that rock overall, it's kind of on the.
Okay.
It's yeah, depending on your perspective, metamorphic. It's got igneous processes, metamorphic processes involved.
I see.
Kind of on the boundary there.
I got it.
But totally different PT environment, but just so you can see a unusually beautiful sample of epidote.
And I'm sorry, I'm distracted here, so you might have to repeat. So the epidote is a metamorphic mineral. It only thrives in this kind of high temperature pressure situation, or not?
Well, epidote actually has a pretty broad stability range.
Okay.
So of course it's classic for the green schist facies, but it can also occur in blue schist. You can also get it in epidote, eclegite facies, and there you can actually get magmatic epidote. So epidote, in unusual circumstances, can form from a silicate melt in a magma, and we actually have some examples of those in the Cascade. You only get that when it's crystallizing at pretty high pressure.
I see.
Because the epidote is a high density mineral.
I see. Okay, that's a beauty. Thanks for bringing it in. Is there some quartz nearby or something?
Yeah, there's some quartz. There's quite a number of other minerals from that locality. Some of them common minerals, some of them rather unusual, but I brought that just so you could actually see one of these minerals that we're talking about.
Good. How about more? I think this is working. People are digging this stuff. I don't know if this is anything in the same ballpark, or you want to take a big detour here.
Well, I was thinking we might take a detour away from the mafic rocks and look now to the ultramafic rocks.
Ultramafic. What is that? So I don't think we're going to take the time to actually mark things off necessarily, but we're trying to hit some of these words here, and we just dealt with blue schist and a little bit of green schist, and we were just looking at an eclegite, and Chris has been talking about the fact we've been dealing with mafic rocks, basically, kind of basaltic compositions, and now we're switching, this is rubbed off already, ultramafic, totally different world, and I'm all ears about this. This is the good stuff.
Sure. So again, mafic, it's referring to that magnesium and iron. That's where the mafic term comes from.
Okay.
Mafic, think basalt. There's a variety of terms out there, but think basalt composition.
Okay.
So it's a composition of a basalt, but as we've seen, those rocks you were just showing, those are no way would you call those a basalt. Well, except for the little popcorn pillar.
Right.
You could call that one.
Right.
But it's the same composition.
Okay.
So ultramafic.
Yep.
More magnesium and iron, lower in silica.
Okay.
So when we think ultramafic, primarily we're thinking mantle rocks. You can get some other environments in the crust where you can form ultramafic compositions, but the mantle is, our biggest example of ultramafic composition. So,
and very rare to get ultramafic at the surface. To get mantle rocks at the surface is not a common thing.
right, because they're dense.
Yes.
So typical mantle rock, about 3.3 grams per cubic centimeter for density, or 3.3 times more dense than water might be an everyday way of thinking about it. Whereas something like most continental rocks, so Mount Stewart, you're probably dealing with 2.8 grams per cubic centimeter, something like that.
Okay.
2.7, 2.8, 2.9, in that range. So
Okay.
normally, the dense stuff wants to stay down deep, and the less dense stuff is floating on top of it.
Okay.
So you need some geological process bringing these things up to the surface.
Good.
And there's a few different ones. So maybe to start out with, here's a sample. So this is from the Twin Sisters Dynite
Heard of
that
it.
you were talking about before.
Haven't you been to the Twin Sisters Donite? No, but you have.
I've been close to it. So that was a sample we actually got donated to the department by the mine operator there. So they're actually quarrying this stuff.
Okay.
It's amazing, beautiful, fresh olivine. So Donite is a rock that is 90+% olivine, and that's a beautiful, fresh example of it.
This is amazing.
And it's unusual to have something that fresh make it up to the surface. So that's a really beautiful example there. Almost all of that olivine. And so that's an example of an ultramafic rock.
And we know it's mantle because of the olivine, or there's other reasons we're just looking at
So-
this in hand sample, we know it's from the mantle?
Well, good point. I haven't actually studied this
Yeah.
particularly, but typically if you want to figure out mantle versus crust, composition, so we can look not only at the bulk composition of the rock, but also the composition of the individual minerals.
Okay,
So an olivine coming out of the mantle, that's about 90% magnesium end member. So olivine has a compositional range from magnesium rich to iron rich.
okay,
Out of the mantle, very magnesium rich, about 90% or so.
Wow.
Whereas the other place where you can form olivine is, you can crystallize that out of basalt. Think
Yes.
about Hawaii. And you can get accumulations of olivine. So how do we know that isn't just some pile of olivine, in some shallow magma chamber?
right.
But typically that's a much more iron-rich composition of olivine you
Okay.
get in that setting. So I
Okay.
haven't analyzed or measured from the Twin Sisters,
Sure.
but that would be a way to tell the difference.
Twin Sisters Dunite, an example of an ultramafic rock from the mantle.
The other thing, we can also look at the other minerals that are in there. I don't know if you can see it at all in that piece. You might see some little black, shiny minerals in there.
I think right there, maybe.
Yeah, so that's the mineral chromite. So it's an iron and
Chromite.
chromium oxide mineral. So where that actually accumulates in masses is a major ore of chromium.
Wow.
So the mantle rock's high in chromium and nickel as well compared to stuff you get in the crust.
Okay.
So that's another thing we can look at.
That's a beauty. Okay, we got a good look at Dunite. I'm very happy. I've never been to the Twin Sisters Dunite, but I'm pretty close
Yeah.
because of your hand sample.
So Dynite is
Yeah.
a specific type, is a specific rock name
Okay.
for an ultramafic rock that has more than 90% olivine in it.
Okay.
So we can think about ultramafic as the broad compositional category. Donite is a very specific rock name within that. Another rock term that you'll run into is peridotite.
Good.
Donite is within that bucket that you would count as peridotite. So peridotite extends down to more orthopyroxene and clinopyroxene. So for our mantle rocks, we're dealing primarily with
Did you have there's
Um,
peridotite there? Or do you not?
oh, we can save that one for a moment, but yeah. So often, these terms will get used semi-interchangeably: ultramafic, peridotite, and so forth. So peridotite, you're just something that's somewhere that's primarily a mix of olivine, clinopyroxene, orthopyroxene,
Okay.
and fairly broad. I think it's if you're at least 40% olivine or something. I forget what the cutoff is there. And so maybe we could look at this sample.
Let's do it.
Next here.
Is this a peridotite?
This is a peridotite.
You guys ready for a peridotite? I'm getting a lot of comments here about this is amazing, this is great, whatever. So keep it going, Chris. We just lost
Okay.
our son, but we'll be all right.
Yeah, so this one I think is interesting. This is a peridotite, but it's got more in it than just olivine. And you'll see it looks a bit different. So first, a comment: even though this is not a Dynite, it does help illustrate where Dynite gets its name. So all that kind of yellowy tan color on there, that's what olivine looks like after it's undergone a little bit of weathering. So
I
it's
see.
a dun color. So I don't know if we use dun as a color for anything other than horses and ultramafic rocks, but Dynite. But what you can see is there's clearly other minerals in there.
Yeah.
And so this is a particularly special sample. This is also from Norway. This is a garnet peridotite. Now, normally we don't associate garnet with ultramafic rocks. We think, oh, you can have garnet in a schist, you can have garnet in a, maybe an amphibolite or something, but you
Yes.
don't normally think about that. It's because you have to be deeper than ballpark 100-kilometer depth to stabilize garnet.
Okay.
So bingo, immediately know this thing is way deep if you see that garnet in there. The other mineral you can see, there's some little tiny bright green clinopyroxenes in there.
Do you guys see them? I don't know if I do.
If we get the sun back, they'll probably show up
Okay.
a little better. They're much smaller than the garnets.
Okay.
But again, I was saying that there's a higher chromium content in these mantle rocks, and so when you have the clinopyroxenes, that chromium goes into the clinopyroxene, and just a little smidge of chromium will give it this beautiful bright green color. And if the sun comes back, we could maybe get a better look at that.
Good.
So that rock, mostly olivine, but it's got some clinopyroxene, also got the garnet in there. So Garnet Peridotite, so that's, you know, deep, really deep mantle. The Donite, probably something shallower.
Can I throw you a curveball? Is this the look of olivine, or the same kind of a weathered olivine look, or not necessarily?
So I think this is a nice segue. So you go from something like that to something like this. Basically just add water at low temperature. So serpentine.
Oh,
okay.
That's a serpentine.
Well, geez,
I believe you. You're the expert.
I don't know if I believe me. You did say it was a curveball.
I did. I did.
You've definitely got a more convincing serpentinite
Shame on me.
over here.
Yeah.
But so remember, this stuff is down in the mantle, high pressure, high temperature,
Right.
not much water around. You bring that stuff up to the surface, below about 500 degrees centigrade. You add water. That olivine is going to convert over into serpentine.
Okay.
Minerals. And so
we get the most exciting
sure,
one?
yeah, that's a beautiful sample there.
Now, you guys, first of all, if you're confused, why are we using this weird camera lens with the rope in front and everything? It's the high magnification thing out the back of the phone. So that's number one. I got Chris teetering on his edge here before he drops into the concrete swamp. So it's all precarious, but we're trying to deal with that sun. Yeah, I think we lost the sun the rest of the afternoon. So
all right.
we might, actually, you know what? We're going to let's go back around here.
Sure.
So we'll go
anyway,
back.
while you're
Please,
doing that,
yeah.
the serpentine, so serpentine is the mineral,
We'll stick
and
here.
serpentinite is the rock type made up of the serpentine. And so you take one of those mantle rocks, you bring it up to the surface, or near the surface, not all the way at the surface, but within shouting distance of the surface, and you add water. That olivine is not stable in a low temperature environment in the presence of water, so it's going to start turning into that serpentine. And so serpentine, the name comes from, I guess some people thought it kind of looked like snake skin.
Sure.
You can get certain weathering patterns where you can actually see those individual serpentine minerals replacing the olivine grain, so you can kind of get a mimic, and that's something you really need to see under the microscope more than the hand sample, but it typically has that kind of waxy appearance.
Sure.
There's quite a range of appearances. It can be kind of a greenish, sometimes more of a blue-green. You can get other low temperature magnesium-rich minerals associated with it. Couple important things about the serpentine is, one, of course, it's high water content, but the other thing, much lower density than the rock that it started from. So you add the water, this stuff is now not this really dense stuff that wants to hang out down in the mantle. It's much lower density, and it can rise up higher in the crust, given the opportunity. It also tends to be fairly weak. It's a fairly soft mineral that can deform, so oftentimes you'll see these shiny surfaces where different pieces have moved past one another.
Now, I'm surprised at the moment, if I'm getting what you're saying, that this serpentinite was originally mantle material that came up and we just added water, but it was originally one of those peridotite guys?
Most typically. I mean,
Really?
if you do have, as I was saying, you can get ultramafic composition occurring at crustal levels from, let's say, for example, if we fast forward enough millions of years, somewhere underneath the Columbia River basalts, we're going to eventually expose a big mafic, ultramafic cumulate complex underneath. So we know that huge mass of lava on the surface, that's only part of the story. There's all the stuff that's left behind underneath. And so we know a bunch of these olivines, pyroxenes, other minerals like that would have crystallized out at depth. So there could very well be, well, almost certainly are compositions like that are ultramafic composition, but they formed at a crustal level. And those, they're typically more of recognized by a higher iron and titanium content compared to slices tectonically brought up out of the mantle. And so, of course, those just because of that small compositional difference, they can still turn into serpentine if you add some water.
Okay, rookie question from me. It looks glassy. It's got nothing to do with the water, like obsidian has a glassy texture and it chills quickly. That's totally not related.
Right, so the serpentine, it's a fibrous or platy mineral. There's actually different varieties of serpentine. It's a sort of a family of minerals. We don't need to get down into the weeds. We'll just kind of keep it at serpentine for our purposes here. But similar to the reason that a rock with a bunch of mica looks shiny, because those platy surfaces are all lined up reflecting the light. So it's typically quite fine grained is the other thing. So you're not going to see, there's not gem quality serpentine that I'm aware of that you're going to go. I don't have anything analogous to that nice Epidote sample when it comes to the serpentine. You can see them under the microscope, but hand sample, it's just going to kind of look like a green, shiny mass. It's not all shiny. Sometimes it's not been sheared up as much, and it's kind of a more solid-looking appearance to it.
Okay, well, I'm seeing a bunch of jade people on here right now.
Okay,
So far, have we dealt with anything in the world of jade?
We have not. I've been kind of circling around it.
Okay.
Maybe one more quick thing before we dive into the jade.
Absolutely.
Before we leave the ultramafic
This is great,
world,
Chris. Keep it going, buddy. Keep it going.
So this is actually a chromite nodule. So most of those black minerals there are chromium. So in some cases you get these pods of chromite. It's very heavy. And you also notice there's a nice bright green mineral in between some of those grains. So that's actually a chromium containing garnet there. And again, it's that chrome giving it that really distinctive bright green color. Of course, we've lost our sun here.
Yeah, the sun's not coming back, but we're going to soldier through, baby.
All right, but I think that's good for the ultramafic rocks. If you got people who are excited about the jade, then let's move on to that, because that really connects the two pieces that we've just gone over.
Good. Let me read this. Chris is doing a great job. Keep it going, Chris. This is amazing. Wow. Can you imagine rock hounding with Chris? All right. All right.
So we talked about what's happening to the mafic rocks in the subduction zone, right? We're going from the basalt to maybe a green schist, a blue schist, into an eclegite, and then we were talking about the mantle.
Yeah.
And of course, what is a subduction zone? We're bringing those crustal rocks down to the mantle, right? And so we're taking that oceanic crust, that basalt, it's interacted hydrothermally with the ocean water. I'm sure a lot of your viewers have seen video footage of those black smokers and stuff. That's kind of the surface expression of that whole thing. So that's turning that basalt that would have started it out, nice and pristine, black and shiny at some point, interacting with the ocean water, turning it green. That might be of the greenness thrust upon them category, if you want to think of it that way. So now there's water in there, and that water is also getting down into the mantle as well, and it's converting that peridotite. So the peridotite or the Donite, those were born green.
Got it.
The Serpentinite then, I guess you could say, had the greenness thrust upon it.
Interesting.
Depending on your perspective. And then as we go down the subduction zone, we've got these hydrated rocks. We've added water to the oceanic plate. So as it's going down, we're increasing pressure and we're increasing temperature. And those water-rich minerals that formed at low pressure, relatively low temperature, start to become unstable as we go deeper. And those hydrous minerals, the water-containing minerals, start breaking down into minerals that have less water. And well, that fluid has to go somewhere. So as we're going from the basalt into the blue schist, into the eclegite, I guess you could say the eclegite maybe attained greenness, I guess. Those fluids are going to rise up and interact with the overlying mantle. And that's where the jade comes in. So I should mention there's two different types of jade.
Jade people, you're listening now? Perk up now. Come on, get that notebook out.
So jade, of course, is kind of a gem term. And the terms that get used in kind of the gemology world versus the geological world kind of have a little bit separate terminology. But you might have heard the terms hard jade and soft jade, or pyroxene jade and amphibole jade, or jadeite jade and nephrite jade. So the real indicator here of the subduction setting is that pyroxene jade, or the hard jade. So
oh, he's got one, ladies and gentlemen.
Here's a sample.
Oh, damn.
Here, again, you might notice that it's pretty dense
It
rock there. So jadeite is that pyroxene mineral in jade. So if you want to be really technical about it, that's a jadeite.
A jadeite.
That's kind of hard to pronounce, so we'll stick with jade here.
Actually, that's jadeite.
So
good.
What's distinctive about jade? So it's a pyroxene mineral. Jadeite is a pyroxene, but it's a sodium-containing pyroxene. So it's got sodium and aluminum in addition to the silica in the pyroxene structure. So unlike our normal pyroxene that you might find out of a basalt, let's say, that's primarily calcium, magnesium, iron, this is sodium and aluminum. So sodium and aluminum, to me, normally you think, well, that's going to be in a feldspar, right? That's going to be in that plagioclase feldspar, that white mineral in Mount Stewart, right?
Yeah.
That's where that stuff belongs. That's where that stuff normally lives, in the crust. But at high pressure and moderate temperature, that sodium, that aluminum, that gets dissolved in the fluid. And those fluids are coming off the slab. It's taking sodium out of that basalt. It's also interacting with the ultramafic rock, so that's a low silica mineral, and so you can get jadeite precipitating in veins. So that's what that sample represents. So that came out of a vein
of
that
jadeite.
was hosted by Serpentinite. So that's actually a sample from Guatemala.
Oh, wow.
You can also get jade that forms by transformation of pre-existing rocks. So there's in the oceanic crust, we talk about basalt, 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 basalt all the time, but there are some other things if you get down into the weeds. So there are sometimes, if you're digging into the literature about ophiolites, you might run into the term Pledgio Granite. That was always a head scratcher for me. I couldn't find it on any classification chart, but it's pretty much quartz and plagioclase. It's kind of the very last little bit of the liquid that crystallizes after you've formed almost everything else. So if you subduct that, there's some petrologic evidence that some of the jadeites form by transformation of that. So you kind of form that composition first, and then you subject it to high pressure, moderate temperature conditions, and thank you. And
thinking of adding water.
adding water, perfect. And you metasomatize it. You bring in these fluids and transform it into jade.
Got it.
Now, the nephrite jade, I haven't really dealt with that so much,
Okay.
but that has a much wider range of formation environments, so it isn't necessarily diagnostic, particularly of a subduction setting. But the jadeite jade, which is actually quite rare, there's not a huge number of localities in the world where you find that, and I think it's on the order of 15 or 20 spots in the world where it's been described. So George Harlow, who's a scientist with the American Museum of Natural History in New York, is one of the real experts on jade formation, and my colleague Tatsuki Tsujimori at Tohoku University in Japan, also studying jade formation processes.
Nice.
So I believe the museum, I know they had a display. I think they probably have some good info. I'm sure if you search for George Harlow and the American Museum, you'll find a lot of good stuff and beautiful photos and so forth.
Hey, we got the sun for
Hey,
just
the
a
sun's coming
second. Is
back.
there something we want to strike while the iron's hot here? Your thin section thing or something?
Ooh, yeah. Why don't we just jump over to that?
Okay, I'm coming back around. We're going to try to go right into the sun, and Chris wants to try a little experiment with you all. We maybe have the sun for a few minutes. And
Okay.
Chris,
So Nick, you can tell me if we're seeing things okay. Is this
kind of. I might have to hold it.
okay? Maybe you can hold that.
Okay.
So this is a thin section of the Twin Sisters Dynite. It probably looks pretty boring right now.
It does look boring. I didn't want to say it, Chris, but it looks boring.
Maybe you can see a few black specks. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold up a couple of polarizing filters with, hopefully you can see it looks black going through there because the polarization directions are perpendicular, and I'm going to slide one above and one below our thin section.
Oh! Snap!
And if you can, maybe it's easier for you to kind of rotate the thin section around a little bit. But the way those minerals are interacting with the light and the polarization directions, you get these beautiful interference colors, and all of a sudden,
Can I
yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I want to get out of the shadow of the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you can see, yeah, you got to rotate the.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky.
I can do it.
Yeah, but you can see individual mineral grains, and those different colors that you're seeing are related to both the mineral composition and the structure, but also their orientation in 3D space. So there's a ton of information in there. So that's what that Twin Sisters Donite looks like when you cut it in a thin slice. And of course, you put this under a petrographic microscope is the real way to do it. But this is just kind of the low-tech.
It's working, baby. They're loving it. So this is like a kaleidoscope. I'm dating myself now. But please repeat why, for those who have never looked down a microscope at minerals, when you're rotating it on the stage like that, why are we seeing different flashes at different times?
So it's because different mineral grains have different orientations.
Okay.
And so they're interacting with the light in different ways. So basically the light, it's electromagnetic radiation that is interacting with the electrons in the atoms that are making up the mineral, and how they interact is dependent on both the composition and the structure. And so we can use that light as a probe of the atomic level composition and structure to tell us what it is, but then we also have the context of all the textures, the relationships between the different minerals in there that have a lot of information as well. So anyway, that'd be a whole different show.
Oh,
but,
yeah, man. So this is the Twin Sisters Donite, that same green thing we were looking at a while ago. Like one of the first hand samples we had. I tossed it somewhere.
Right here. Yeah.
Let me...
If you want to do a switcheroo here.
So we were just looking at a thin section. Oh, I got to flip you around. We were looking at a thin section of this guy. And those minerals we were looking at had so many different colors, but it's not like the minerals had different colors.
Right.
It's
I guess the quickest analogy may be to think about similar physical process to those rainbow colors you get on soap bubbles, or an oil slick on a puddle. It's an interference phenomenon. So it's a totally different physical phenomenon from what makes the rock green when you look at it just with the naked eye.
I think it's official. I think that worked.
Okay, well, cool. While we
still got
the
some
good,
light, yeah.
While we're still on the jade thing.
Okay. Oh, now I want to still do the reverse, so I'm flip. Come on, Larry. Come on, Larry. Oh. Just a couple of dudes in the backyard playing with the. Oh, what do we got here, Chris?
So the green there is another green pyroxene. So this is a cut and polished slab. This is actually from the Alps in Italy.
Damn.
And what's really interesting about that is we've been talking about mafic rocks. We've been talking about ultramafic rocks. We've been talking about oceanic crust and mantle. And this is what happens when you stick a bit of continental crust down a subduction zone. So that's started out life as a granitic composition, so continental crust.
Really?
Went down the subduction zone to quite high pressure and moderate temperature, and again, granite's got those feldspars in there that have that sodium and aluminum in there. You get it down deep enough, you end up with that green pyroxene, that jadeite in there, and some other minerals that recrystallize at the higher temperature conditions. Wow. So that's actually from a quarry where they're cutting and polishing this stuff and selling it as building stone. So I was at a conference there a number of years ago, and so sometimes at these conferences they'll give you a little rock sample of something that's of note from the local area, and so I just grabbed that one. And
beauty. That
was a fun one. And then if we want to just quickly do one last one, this one's kind of a crazy one, but this one right here, this is actually different but also related to what we've been talking about. So in this case, that bright green mineral is a chromium-rich mica. Oop, starting to lose the sun there.
Yeah.
Meriposite or fuchsite is also, I think, maybe the approved term now. Oh, that's great for geological jokes, yeah. But this is from California,
Sorry, Patrick.
California gold country. So it's bright green because of chromium. The chromium came out of ultramafic rocks, out of serpentinites, and then you can see some pyrite in there, and there's some quartz, and so this is associated with some of the gold mineralization in the California gold country. But since the topic was green, I had it sitting on my shelf, and
Sure.
And so there is kind of a tangential connection to our main theme here, which is oceanic crust and mantle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, love it. Love it. Boy, take a breath, man. Take a breath. I love it. It is approaching the top of the hour. I wonder, let me flip you around. I don't know if you feel like doing anything on the chalkboard, but at least help us. I don't think we know what an ophiolite is yet.
Right, we haven't gotten to that yet. Shoot.
And can we do it graphically? I don't know if we really need more hand samples.
Graphically would be great.
Get that Larry shadow out of your way here. Let's see.
Okay, so I think we'll use this one that you've got here.
Good.
So we've got our oceanic crust. Is this supposed to be Hawaii sitting on here?
Not necessarily. Just any kind of spreading ridge or
okay,
whatever.
spreading ridge is good.
Yeah.
So we're talking spreading ridge, not Hawaii.
Right.
But ophiolite, I don't know how far that term goes back, but some of you might have encountered this term, the Steinman Trinity, of association of serpentinite with basalt or green schist, and then deep ocean sediments. So classically chert, right?
Okay.
So what is that association? So we've got altered mantle, basically. We've got basalt, and then we've got these sediments that had to form very far from a continent, where you're not getting any sand or silt or anything, where it's pretty much just dead critters drifting to the bottom of the ocean floor. And so the interpretation is you get these plates spreading apart.
Yep.
So we've got the mantle coming up, plates moving apart here. As part of that decompression, you got hot mantle. If you bring it up quickly enough to the surface, remember the heat takes a long time to get in or get out.
Right.
So it stays hot, and you've released the pressure, and it melts when you get to shallower pressure. So that's where your basaltic magma comes from. That's forming your pillow basalts, right? Remember our popcorn pillow there.
Right.
Sometimes you also get what are referred to as sheeted dikes. So that's where the crust is pulling apart, the lithosphere is pulling apart, and you get that magma rising up. It fills it up, it makes a dike. You split that dike apart, you put another dike in there. So it's basically dikes going into dikes going into dikes. There's no, our normal thing, you look at the Teanaway dikes, right? There's a dike and then there's some wall rock that's different.
Right.
But here it's just one dike after another, because you just keep pulling on that crust, pulling. You might have thousands of kilometers of extension going on there over the life of one of these things if it's really long-lived. You don't always get that. Sometimes the magma supply is not that much, and then you've got the mantle underneath. So you've got the mantle down here, you've got your basalt, and then after this stuff forms, as this is drifting away from the spreading ridge, then you're just very slowly accumulating those deep ocean sediments. So if you have those radiolaria, those critters that form a silica shell, they're photosynthesizing, you're floating up at the surface of the ocean, they die, they sink down to the bottom, you get a siliceous ooze down there. As that gets buried, that amorphous silica, which forms the little shell, gradually transforms eventually into quartz, fine-grained quartz, producing your chert. Some of your viewers might have heard of iron manganese nodules down in the deep ocean. So commonly these things have a higher manganese content to them, but indicating form far away. So that's kind of the classic ophiolite association.
Which is what? So it's kind of a suite of rocks. An ophiolite
It's a suite of rocks. So it's not one rock, it's not one mineral, it's an association. So deep ocean sediments,
Yeah.
the cherts, basalts of some variety,
Right.
and then serpentinite
Okay.
is kind of that classic association. And so that was way back in, I don't know, 1903 or something that I think that Steinman Trinity, maybe one of your viewers knows something more accurate about that. But it really wasn't until plate tectonics came along that people started making the connection between ophiolite and oceanic crust. And so there's kind of the classic 1972 Penrose Conference GSA definition where you had those deep marine sediments, you had the pillow basalts, you had the sheeted dikes, you had layered gabbras, isotropic gabbras. So basically this is all basalt of different things. I'm sure you look in any intro geology textbook, you're going to find something like that. And then underneath you have the mantle. And more recently, people have appreciated much more that there's quite a variety of products that can come from a spreading center. So that's one of them, but that's really more a fast spreading oceanic spreading center like the East Pacific Rise.
Yes.
Moving apart pretty fast, you're cranking out lots of basalt, you're moving that mantle up to the surface fast, it's pretty hot when it gets up close there, large volume of basalt. But you look at areas where the spreading rate is much, much slower, you don't get so much basalt, so you tend to get these pods of basaltic composition, so like a gabbro or something, and then you get tons of serpentinite, even serpentinite exposed right on the oceanic floor, exposed along faults and so forth. So there's a variety, but if you look back in the older literature, people a lot of times would try to fit everything into that 1972 classic Penrose stratigraphy, and they'd kind of be grabbing different things and trying to reconstruct it. And sometimes, of course, that's the case. It really did start out that way, and it got dismembered by faults later. In other cases, it probably was one of these more slow-spreading ridge type scenarios, and maybe you never had some of those pieces there to begin with.
Well, this is fascinating, and I think I'm going to ask a question that's my own question, and it's going to transition us to live Q&A with everybody else, if you're okay. So my question is, especially if we look at that thing right there, and it's totally an ocean floor situation, we might be 1,000 miles away from the nearest continent, let's say. Why didn't all that stuff go down a subduction zone? Why do we have any deep ocean stuff up here above sea level?
Excellent question. And the answer is almost all of it does go down the subduction zone. Very little of it gets preserved. Same thing, especially for the blue schist and the eclogite. I mean, that's why they're widely distributed rocks, but they're not things that you see in massive abundances. I mean, if you think about the ocean floors, are 70% of the Earth's surface. It's like, well, that stuff all went down a subduction zone at some point. Why isn't it 70% blue schist and eclogite?
Yeah.
And the answer is it's more dense than the mantle. Most of that stuff just gets recycled and never comes back. Well, I shouldn't say never comes back. It comes back, but in greatly transformed. We see little whiffs of it in the chemical or isotopic signature of basalts that are coming up to the surface, or you see it geophysically way the heck down there, or you see it trapped inside of tiny diamond inclusions. But it's dense. It doesn't want to come back up. So it's unusual circumstances. You get a little bit of it, and it pretty much comes down to buoyancy, to gravity. So how do you get a dense rock up to the surface? Well, you either make it less dense, so you take the mantle rock and you add water and you turn it into serpentinite. Well, now it's not so dense anymore. It doesn't want to go back down into the mantle.
Right.
Or you surround it by lower density rocks. So where you get these eclogites and blue schist, you don't just have that stuff mile after mile after mile and nothing else. They're associated with lower density rocks. So they're embedded in a melange of serpentinite, or maybe a sedimentary rock, a shale or a gray wacky. In some cases you have continental crusts that are hosting these things, and that gets down there, but it's not as dense as the mantle, and eventually some of it is going to want to come back to the surface. It's more buoyant and will come back up. So the answer is most of it does go down, but in certain circumstances we can actually scrape some of it off in one way or another.
Love it, love it. Okay, we're switching to you guys, and I'm going to get Chris started with the first question. I'm going to go in and get some coats and some hats. Do you need it?
I'm doing good, actually.
Oh man, I guess I'm not in Wisconsin anymore. I'm getting wimpy. So
I put on my long underwear and I brought a bunch of coats because it was so cold yesterday, and then it was all nice and sunny. It's like, hey, this is great.
Okay, so I'm going to read the first question from you guys, and then I'm going to run in real quick and get some clothes. Chris is a man. He's a man's man, so he's in good shape.
I'm a
I can at least-
soft Californian.
You've developed some thick skin. I can at least get you some hot water in your mug. So you know the drill. Uppercase for your questions. And Zig Sta has our first question. Are there different products in deeper subduction, i.e. Marianas versus Juan de Fuca?
Okay, so yes, and I was alluding to that a little bit. Marianas, again, that's old, cold Pacific plate. So that's as it cools, and I should mention it's not just that basalt, but it's the mantle lithosphere underneath. It gets cold and therefore denser. So high density, it's going to sink back into the mantle more rapidly. That means you're going to maintain low temperatures down to higher pressures, whereas our example here in Cascadia, the Juan de Fuca Ridge is not that far offshore, so the crust is not very old. In other words, it hasn't had much of a chance to cool off. And then it's also subducting fairly slowly, so that's more chances for the heat to come in. So you're going to get a higher temperature at a given pressure. So Marianas, you're going to do lots of blue schist, low temperature eclegites, whereas here, probably not a whole lot of blue schist in the Cascadia subduction zone today, more green schists and so forth. I guess since, oh, here comes Nick.
All right. Here, we'll do a switcheroo.
Excellent. Thank you.
From some viewers in Seattle.
Perfect.
Okay, you ready for another question?
You know, I did see a question scroll by that I would like to answer.
Please.
Somebody asked, why are these things green?
Good.
And so color in minerals, there's lots of different causes of color in minerals. But again, it comes down to how the light, remembering the light is electromagnetic radiation, and it's interacting with the atomic level structure of the minerals. So pretty much what's happening is, in simplified terms, the color that you're seeing, you know, the light coming from the sun or from your light bulb, it's a whole spectrum of different colors, right? So you can split it out in a prism. Some of those colors are going to get absorbed by the mineral. So different color equals different energy. That means it's interacting differently with that atomic structure of the mineral. And so it comes down to structure and composition. In terms of composition, I mentioned chromium a number of times. So those were examples of chromium. It's typically that first row transition metals on the periodic chart. So what's the most common of those? Iron. So the usual answer for most things, why is it green, why is it red, why is it pretty much any color other than white, is iron, most of the time, but not always.
Love it. You doing okay? You want to go a few more minutes here?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Automatic scroll. Good. Sandy asks, is there a good example of sheeted dikes in Washington?
Ooh, you know, I'm not familiar enough. I would imagine people probably looked at that in the Ingalls complex or maybe up in the San Juan Islands.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure.
Fine. Kyle, what are the processes that bring mantle rock to the surface? Same question for subducted plate?
Excellent question. So main categories are pretty much either subduction, plates coming together, and you're sticking some crust down there. The water's coming up and hydrating. Actually, I should maybe do this on the chalkboard.
Yeah, do it.
Here, actually. So we've got fluids coming up from that crust. So over here, when you're deep enough, you're melting, you're forming magmas, you're getting your chain of volcanoes. But out here in this mantle wedge, it's too cold to melt. So those fluids are going in there, converting that mantle rock into serpentinite, which is low density. Some of that can make its way up. There's some little serpentinite diapirs, so basically mud volcanoes of serpentinite out in the forearc of the Marianas Islands would be one example. So that's where you've added water at depth. It's become low density, and you've actually carried some of it up to the surface. The other thing, of course, is if you shove some continental crust down this trench, you can tectonically insert some mantle, and because that continental crust is buoyant, some of that's eventually going to come back to the surface, and you bring it up that way. You could also imagine if you have some of this rock here kind of getting bulldozed up on the top of the snowplow, so to speak.
And you have addressed why it's green, why ocean rocks are green. Peter says, which is the deepest green rock we can usually see?
Ooh, well, I guess it depends on your definition of usually. I guess we could talk about deepest green rock that you could see that we know of at all, ever. We do actually have our deepest record of actual physical samples from the Earth's deep interior that we know of today are tiny inclusions inside of diamonds. So one thing that's really interesting is that subducted oceanic crust, it keeps going down, down, down. Well, you get below, 120, 150 kilometers, you're in the diamond stability field. So we haven't talked about carbon. There's not normally a lot of carbon in these rocks, but there is some. And so those diamonds form down there, and they're actually trapping little bits, little tiny minerals. And so some of those minerals they're trapping are actually eclegitic minerals, so garnets and pyroxenes, and the deepest ones that have been recovered so far are actually out of the lower mantle. So there's out of the mantle transition zone, but some of them even deeper than 660 kilometers depth. So that's the deepest thing we know of ever. In terms of the deepest thing you could see commonly, well, around here you've got that French Cabin Creek blue schist, green schist. That's pretty deep. If you're down in California, there's eclegites associated with the Franciscan complex. Those would be deeper. There's even one little, barely eclegite that Ned Brown worked on years back, and Sean Mulcahy at Western has been poking around there more recently. There's you've been talking about the Yukon-Tanana terrain a little bit. There's eclegites up there, pretty high pressure. So there's actually quite a few of them scattered around, but they're not highly abundant rock. So depending on what you think of as most common.
You kind of just touched on this, but Price wonders, are there direct associations with specific green rocks and specific terrains? And I'm going to kind of be doing that next time, but are there specific exotic terrains that you can think of immediately that are full of these green rocks?
Well, you've been talking a lot about these oceanic terrains. So anywhere you got a lot of basalt, a lot of serpentinite, I mean, pretty much that's looking oceanic plateau, ocean crust, something like that. So that'd be the short answer.
S. Gudgel and I have a question. I'll combine my question with yours, S. Is soapstone a form of serpentinite? And my part of that is, are you as hung up as I am on calling something serpentinite versus serpentine?
Oh, good. Good question. I guess, at the end, if we want to loop back to the whole terminology thing, we could throw that in there. So soapstone, it's not a formal geological term, but it's kind of anything soft. I mean, I think of it as talc, a talc-rich rock. And so talc is a magnesium-rich, very hydrous silicate mineral that you can get as part of the serpentinization process. There's some other environments that do form talc as well, I should point out. Remind me of the question again.
Well, that's the soapstone, and then I'm wondering, some people call it serpentine, even though I call it serpentinite. I mean, what's the difference?
Serpentine is the mineral and serpentinite is the rock. I would say for our purposes, I kind of use them interchangeably. I wouldn't get hung up on it.
Good. One less thing to get hung up on. Nice job. Muffler boy. Okay. Gary asks, how does migmatite fit into this model?
Oh, we have not talked about migmatite. So migmatite is high temperature.
Okay.
So that is literally mixed rock. So you've got silicate melt and you've got some solid stuff. So it's kind of on the boundary between igneous and metamorphic. So everything we've touched on here is much lower temperature than that.
Yes. And that's your wheelhouse. You're up in Chelan and the migmatite,
right.
And you're doing some current research further north than that. I mean, so we might at some point, but not really into our green discussion today. Toughen Up Fluffy asks, are these all accretionary wedge minerals, or do you also find volcanics?
In terms of the green stuff, I mean, accretionary wedge, that would be, you'd be scraping off altered basalt from the oceanic floor. You'd be scraping up bits of serpentinite. So of course the basalt is a volcanic. I mean, you can certainly add water to mafic or intermediate composition volcanic rocks like volcanic arch rocks. You can get plenty of green rocks there too. We haven't really been touching on those, but I'd say anything that is mafic or intermediate composition igneous rock and you add water, it's going to turn green to some degree or another.
Got it. How about a few more and we're done, Chris? The breeze is picking up. Again, I'm wimpier than you are. Ben wonders if you could explain the difference between peridotite and olivine. I think you did, but can we do it again?
So olivine is the mineral, peridotite is the rock, and it's kind of a category of different rocks in there that includes Donite versus peridotite. There's Websterite, Harpsburgite, other terms in there that we don't really need to dig into. But olivine's the mineral, peridotite is the rock.
David says, is the cold, dense crust the reason why the Marianas Trench is so deep compared to other trenches?
That, and also I think the fact that it's so far away from a sediment source, because you form a trench, you know, you dump sediments into it, but if you don't have any source for it. But definitely the fact that it's very old, cold lithosphere is why it's so deep there. But also because we haven't filled it in with other stuff.
I'm getting a bunch more questions about the green color. Would you mind one more, just a couple sentences about why these ocean rocks are green?
Well, the composition basically. So if you have a mafic or an ultramafic composition, plenty of iron in there, and it's really in each of these minerals, in the chlorite, in the actinolite, in the epidote, in the olivine, in the serpentine. It's the presence of iron in all of those things that's giving it the green color that we're seeing.
Thank you. Gary, can you get a blue serpentinite?
You know, some of them do have kind of a bluish tinge to them.
I notice as the questions are getting shorter, so maybe you've had enough too. Just kidding. We'll do 3 more. How about that?
Okay.
Tony from Whitewater, Wisconsin. That's my home turf, Tony. What are the green minerals commonly found in agates in the Pacific Northwest? Are there green minerals in agates?
Ooh, you know, I'm not as familiar with that. I mean, in an agate, you're typically filling in some kind of a fracture or vug in some other rock. I don't have any off the top of my head, but that isn't not something I've really studied much.
Good. Let's finish with an easy one. What are the classes that you commonly teach at Central, and what kind of research are you doing with your students?
In terms of classes that I normally teach, kind of big picture, normally I would teach a rocks and minerals class, so kind of that's the first lab class where students get to actually learn about identifying minerals and rocks and what we can actually interpret from them, so taking it to the next level beyond the intro. I teach a mineralogy class. I'm going to be teaching that next quarter. So we get to learn how to use the microscopes, dive into things a bit more detail, kind of think about the atomic level properties and chemical bonding, a bit of thermodynamics and some of the interpretation stuff. And then I do a couple elective class, so petrography, petrogenesis class, where we really dive in to how to read these things, kind of more as a research tool. Do a geochronology class, so those are kind of the main ones. And then in terms of current research, been working on the Chelan Migmatite complex, so got some work going on there. Done for quite a few years, a lot of work on very high pressure rocks, eclegites and associated rocks, mainly over in China. And then my 2 newest students, one of them is going to be working on some local rocks, the Monash inlier that you've been talking about, so we're kind of in the vicinity where that blue schist came from. And then my other student is actually doing a method development project in the lab, so developing some lab methods here for doing some of the analyses.
And for a few of our hardcore fans who know a lot of the research going back decades, they know the name Mattinson from the 1970s and even the 1960s. That isn't you, is it?
No, so my dad did his PhD here in the 60s, and he really did the first modern geochronology in the North Cascades. So that citation still pops up here and there.
So Jim Mattinson is associated with which terrains or with which rocks?
Oh gosh, you know, he's
All
worked all over. I mean, certainly worked a lot on the Schley-Megmatite complex in particular, but did a lot of the dating in there, and you know, name pops up. So Swake Nice,
Yes.
the dumbbell Marble Mount Plutons, and did a lot of work over the years. Coast Range Ophiolite down in California, working Klamath, things like that.
Nice. Will your dad be watching this, do you suppose?
Well, no, his health is not doing too well right now.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right. Well, one quick little last look at our board and our revisit of our two goals for today, and then we'll get to a toast. So, I don't know, Chris, did we hit everything here? The greenstone, Sharon from Colville had a greenstone for us.
You know, I could quickly comment on that.
Please step on in here.
Sure, greenstone versus green schist. I tend to use greenstone to refer to the sub-green schist part of the PT diagrams. We don't quite get up high enough P&T, but you know, lots of things that are in the green schist facies in terms of pressure and temperature, they don't actually have they don't look very schisty.
Yeah.
So I would say for this audience, I wouldn't worry overly much about the difference between them.
Okay. Well, we hit pretty much everything else, I'd say, and I hope that you feel like we accomplished a few things for you and answered a few of your questions. A toast to you, and do you want to show off your gauge?
Oh, that's right. We didn't even do this. In case you're wondering how we actually measure pressures in these rocks, you know, you just took this thing up, and Nick, do you have your meat thermometer?
Oh, I forgot it. Sorry.
Oh well, anyway, you just stick a thermometer in, you hook up a pressure gauge. No, it's not that simple. But by measuring the composition and looking at the types of minerals, you can calculate what the pressures and temperatures of these things are quantitatively.
Good. Thank you. So here's one of the many wines that Julie dropped off last Sunday, and I enjoy this one. So, Chris, Chris and I want to toast you. Step in the frame here, Chris. Can you see yourself?
Yeah, there we go.
So here's to you.
Cheers.
Delightful.
Good way to end the show.
Kind of a hint of ultramafic there. Here's to your health, the health of your family and friends. Would you like to offer a toast?
Here's to all the green rocks aficionados out there. You know, when Nick told me the title of this show, I thought, geez, Nick, you may as well call this Rocks Only a Mother Could Love. But it seems like we got some excited folks about this.
I think we do. Here's to
So,
you.
here's to you.
Okay, let's look at the schedule for next time. Thanks to Chris for his amazing information and hopefully digestible to you. You are welcome to come back here in the backyard or the front yard or the front porch. I have no idea. But we will be back to the business of dissecting a few more terranes on the east side of a very famous fault that will go unnamed, although many of you know it already. So next time we will be in the eastern foothills of the Cascades. And then I've actually, thanks to pencils by Patrick, have been coloring like a madman upstairs, and I've got the next half a dozen shows figured out now as we kind of cruise through much of the North Cascades, which is really the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. So we're finally to the hornet's nest, and I have a rough plan and hope to continue to kind of put that plan together. So, Until next time, one more time for Chris and myself, here's to you and thank you for tuning in. Thank you, I love you, and goodbye.